All right, good morning. It's good to see everybody again. This morning's lesson, sometimes people will recommend that I preach on something. And 9 times out of 10, I will ignore that and preach on something else. This time, someone said, I was doing a Bible study and there's this story in Scripture that no one had ever heard before. And I thought, hey, that sounds just like the kind of story that you should talk about in your sermon, overlooked. Like, you know what? That's a good point. And I don't know if you've ever done this or not, but have you ever had someone tell you about a Bible story and you thought, I know that story, right? Like, I know that one, I've read that one, I know what it's about. And so in my head, when they mentioned the story to me, I was like, I already know exactly what I'm going to do with this lesson. And then I started rereading the story and I realized that lesson that I thought I had is no good. Because I had misremembered, I'd forgotten parts of the story. And fortunately or unfortunately for us this morning, the parts I'd forgotten are not easy parts. They're not easy parts to deal with. They're not easy parts to read about. They're pretty difficult, actually. And for some of us, they might be a little bit triggering. So just so you're aware, we're going to talk about some things this morning that deal with abuse from family members. And I just want you to be aware of that before we jump in, just what you're getting into this morning. But in some ways, it's unavoidable because it's the story. It's there in the story that I'm calling the tale of 2 Tamars. Now, there's actually 3 Tamars in Scripture. And we will look at all 3 of them this morning, but one of them is only mentioned by name. The other 2 have stories. One of them we've actually already looked at, which is in Genesis chapter 38. It's the story of Tamar and the sons of Judah. If you remember that story where Tamar had been married off to one of 3 sons of Judah, the actual Judah. And the first one was wicked, and God killed him. And the second son was wicked, and God killed him. And the third son, Judah wasn't so willing to hand over the third son to this woman, Tamar, that he thought, she's killing my children. But she wasn't killing his children. And he says to her, my youngest son is pretty young. Just refreshing your memory here. My youngest son, he's pretty young. He's not really old enough. He's not marriage age yet. So why don't you go live a life of solitude for a while? But when he's old enough, I'll give you a ring-a-ding, and you can come back and marry him. But the call never comes. And she realizes he is never going to make good on this promise. He is never going to do what's right. He's never going to be a just man all on his own, so I'm going to help him out. And remember, she devises a plan, and she dresses like a prostitute, and he comes by after the death of his wife, and Judah sees her and says, hey, I'm going to have her. And he has her, and she gets pregnant. You remember the story? And at the very end of the story, he says, she is more righteous than I am because I was unwilling to give her my son. I was unwilling to do what was right. That's the first story of Tamar that we've already looked at. And here's the verse. Judah recognized then and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah. But then we also have the story of the sons of Judah and Tamar. And there's a lot of parallels between what happens with Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38 and what we're about to read. There's a lot of differences too, but there's a lot of similarities. So let's jump into the story of Absalom and his pursuit of justice, because this is the part I had not remembered. I remembered Absalom as this power-hungry, power-thirsty man who was willing to do anything to take the reins from his father David. And I had forgotten about this part of his story because, like a lot of us, we're complicated people. We're not a monolith. We're not just singular, one type of personality, one characteristic, or one attribute. We have a lot of attributes. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. Same with him. So let's read this. It's a horrible, awful, wretched story. Just putting it out there so you know what we're diving into. It is bad. And sadly, for some of us, it's going to be all too familiar. 2 Samuel chapter 13. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Now, if you're reading this carefully, you'll notice that all of these characters are related. Tamar and Absalom are whole brother, whole sister. Amnon is half-brother, half-sister, or he's not half-sister, he's half-brother to Tamar and to Absalom. They're all related. They're one big dysfunctional family. And it says that he fell in love with her. And the actual wording is, he is obsessed with her. Some translations will say he fell in lust with her. He desired her. He wanted her. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. This is like straight out of a Lifetime Movie Network movie. You know the man that shows up out of town? He moves from the big city into the small town. Has a slight beard, and he's obsessed over someone in the town. This is him, except it's his half-sister. Amnon is a messed up, sick, and evil individual. He is so obsessed with her, he can't get his mind off of her. He can't stop thinking about her. He's become physically ill because he is so focused on her. It says she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Do you know what that means? It means that he has been trying probably for years to get with her. He's made the unwanted advances. He's said some things maybe he shouldn't have said, trying to see, kind of play the field and see how she's going to react to certain things. And it just seems like her guards are up and he's got no chance. No matter what he tries, everything is failing, and he is sick to his stomach that this just isn't ever going to happen. Now Amnon had an advisor named Jonadab, son of Shimeah, David's brother. Yes, Jonadab is a cousin. So you got a brother and a sister and a half-brother and a cousin who's the advisor to the half-brother. You can see this is a messed up place to live. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. You could say wickedly shrewd, evilly shrewd. He asked Amnon, "Why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me?" In other words, Amnon, your life should be good, man. Why do you look so sick and so ill? Why do you look so pathetic day after day? You're the son of the king. You have no reason to feel the way you feel. Please tell me what's going on. Amnon said to him, "I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Hey man, whatever you want to say to make yourself feel better about yourself. She's your sister too. No, it's Absalom's sister. No, that's your half-sister, pal. He says, I'm in love with her. I'm in love with her, and I've been trying to be with her, and she just won't. And I'm just sick about it. Go to bed and pretend to be ill, Jonadab says. When your father comes to see you, say to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight, so I may watch her, and then eat it from her hand. So here's cousin Jonadab to the rescue for Amnon. Pretend you're sick. Take advantage of the kindness of your sister. Treat her kindness as a weakness. Her father will send her to take care of you, and she will come and she will take care of you because even though you're a creep, you are her half-brother. Take advantage of that. Exploit that. Use that. Make her do it. This is a sick part. Make her do it while you can still see her. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight, so I may eat from her hand. David sent word to Tamar at the palace, Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him." So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough, kneaded it, made the bread in his sight, and baked it. She took the pan and served him the bread, but he refused to eat. And we'll find out here in a sec why he refuses to eat, because there's still a lot of people in this room. "Send everyone out of here," Amnon said. He has to get alone with her. And these people have to listen to him. So everyone left him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food here into my bedroom." So in other words, she said, "Okay, your food's ready, come and eat." But he pretends he's so sick he can't even get out of bed. He says, "Please, everyone, please go." And so everyone leaves, and he says, "Oh, bring it to me here in my bed, so I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the bread she prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. But when she took it to give him to eat, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me, my sister." "No, my brother," she said to him. "Don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing." She tries to reason with him. "Don't do it. Don't force this thing on me. What are you thinking? What are you doing? What about me?" she says. "Where could I get rid of my disgrace?" You see, because she is a daughter of a king who probably one day might get married to a royal from another tribe or another nation, and if he does this to her, she'll be of no use. Now, if that fact alone makes you sick to your stomach, good. No value to David, her dad. What's he going to do with her now? He probably thought to himself, what good is she now? I had planned to make a treaty with tribe such and such, or nation so and so, but now I can't because she does this thing, even though she doesn't do it at all. And so she pleads with him. She says, think about it. Do you realize, if you do this thing, how that's going to affect me the rest of my life? And as you may have guessed, Amnon does not care how it will affect her the rest of her life. So she says, and what about you? Think about yourself then. You'd be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. As you read the story, you would wish that were true. But as you'll see, no one really seems to care what Amnon has done. Almost no one. She says, please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you. Actually, he probably would have, because he wants her to marry someone else from another place. She's begging, she's pleading, she's trying. Don't do this thing, don't do it. But he refused to listen to her. He refuses to listen to her through this entire story. He refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. Now, I told you this is a tough story. Then Amnon hated her with an intense hatred. He got what he wanted, and he was done with her. He hated her more than he had ever loved her. Amnon said to her, get up and get out. No, she said to him. That might seem like a strange response, because that would be like the first thing any of us would want to do if we'd been abused. And I know some of us have been, and I'm sorry that this story has kind of sprung on us like this. No, she said to him. Sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me. You see, because in the ancient world, especially in Israel, they had a rule that if a woman had been abused by a man, then that man has to marry her. Now, again, you might think that is really weird, and it is, but the real gist behind it is the fact that you can't just treat someone like that and then have no responsibility for them the rest of their lives. If you're going to do that, you need to feed them and clothe them and take care of them. And if you're not ready to do that, then don't do it. So she says, will you please follow the law of Moses here? You have wronged me. Now you must take care of me. Don't send me away. It's worse than what you've done to me. I will be a desolate, living, perpetual widow the rest of my life. I'll never have a companion. I'll never have children. I will die alone if you do this to me. But he refused to listen to her. He called his personal servant and said, get this woman out of my sight and bolt the door after her. I picture a deadbolt because I live in the 21st century. I don't know what kind of bolt they would have had. Get her out of here and lock the door behind her. I never want to see her again. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing a robe of many colors, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the ornate robe she was wearing. She put her hands on her head and went out, weeping aloud as she went. Do you know why she's doing all of that? Because the same passage of Scripture that says you have to marry her and take care of her also says if this sort of thing happens, you're going to cry out so that the world will know what has happened to you, so that someone can come and save you and do what is right. Let the world know what happened so they can react and exact justice. And so that's what she does. She goes and she cries out. Her brother Absalom said to her, because he sees her, has that Amnon, your brother, been with you? He knows as soon as he sees her. Because, like everyone else, they knew Amnon was a creep for a long time. And he knows exactly what his brother did. Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart. Now that might sound like he's saying, try to forget about it. But that's actually not what he's saying. What he's saying is, I'll take care of it. And Tamar lived with her brother in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. A perpetual living widow. Because of her brother. When King David heard this, he was furious. It doesn't tell us why he's upset. Just tells us he's upset. And Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. You know who the third Tamar is? Absalom's daughter. In her honor and out of respect for her, he named his daughter after his sister. Named her Tamar. Because he actually loved his sister. Unlike his brother. And he took care of her. She came and lived at his house. Because no other person, no other man was going to be willing to do that for her. So he said, I'll do it for you. You hang tight. Try not to let it bother you. I will take care of this. 2 years go by. And nothing happens to him. 2 years. 2 years, Tamar waits to see if her father, King David, will do anything for her, and nothing happens. 2 years, Absalom waits to see if his father David will do what's supposed to be done, and nothing happens. And so Absalom forms a plan. The Bible tells us it's time to shear sheep, and he throws a party. And you can imagine the wild times. The sheep shearing parties were quite an event, I'm sure. And he invites his brothers. Hey, everyone come to my place. We're going to have a party and shear some sheep. Of course, everyone's excited as you are. Yeah. Let's do this. He goes, please make sure my brother Amnon comes too. And King David's like, I don't know if we should do that. And he's like, no, make sure he's there. We're going to have a party. It's going to be great. And he'd already told his men, we're going to get Amnon drunk like crazy. And when he's too drunk to defend himself, and I say, take him out, take him out. Because my do-nothing lame duck dad has no plan of doing anything right for his daughter. So I will. So that's what they do. They go to the sheep shearer party. Amnon, that creep, he gets drunk. And he gets killed. As I read this story, I ask myself, why does David do nothing? Why doesn't he do anything? Did he just love his son more than he loved his daughter? Is he upset because his daughter is now not marriage material? Is he going to upset other tribes if he gets involved? Maybe he doesn't do anything because he sees so much of himself in Amnon. Because Amnon saw a woman, and he wanted her, and he took her, just like David had done with Bathsheba. So maybe he thought, who am I to judge? I've done the same thing. So I just won't do anything. Maybe I'll just not do anything at all and hope it all goes away. Maybe no one will love her enough to do anything about this, and it'll just all get swept under the rug. Why doesn't anyone do anything? All those servants are there. You think they don't know what Amnon, the super creepy son of David, is up to? They've seen it. They've seen how he looks at her. They saw how he was watching her when she was baking the bread. They know what's up. They know they're not sending them out of the room for no reason. I've had this happen to me when I was in a sales presentation, believe it or not. Not the rape part, thankfully. Where a sales rep came in and she was extremely beautiful. And she came in and she presented her furniture, because I used to sell office furniture, to a group of men. And one of the men looked at me and said, hey, Rob, why don't you go show those girls around? Because there was two of them. So we can talk about what they presented. They weren't going to talk about what she presented. They don't even know what she was talking about. They were so obsessed with how she looked. I doubt they heard a word she said. No one does anything. The servants know they do nothing. You're not allowed to read ahead. That's in 2 Samuel chapter 14. You got to stay in chapter 13. Jonadab, her own cousin, plots against her. Sometimes the people that are put in our lives by God to protect us, we actually find out are against us. Happens in families all the time. You know, we always teach our kids stranger danger, right? Oh, strangers are dangerous. So is your uncle. And so is your dad. So is your cousin. And it's sad. And oftentimes what we find is the people that should be protecting you against that one, at best, just doesn't say anything at all. Maybe it'll all go away on its own. And no one thinks about how that victim has to live the rest of her life or his life. Because we said and did nothing. I can't get involved. I mean, who am I to get involved? Hopefully you're a good person. Her own cousin plots against her. With her brother. So that he can do to her what no man should ever do to anyone. So who's going to seek justice for Tamar? Do you see the resonances of the first Tamar story in this one? She needs someone from the tribe of Judah to stand up for her and exact justice for her and do the right thing, and no one, not a single son of Judah except for one, as we'll see, wants to do anything for her. So Absalom says, after 2 years, okay, I've had enough. Enough waiting. No one is going to do anything. My father is going to do nothing. So I will stand up for my sister. She'll live in my house. I'll provide for her, and I will avenge her. Remember the backstory I gave you about the shearer party? And everyone's there, and everyone is now drunk, or at least Amnon's drunk. And Absalom orders men, listen, when Amnon is high in spirits from drinking wine, and I say to you, strike Amnon down, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Haven't I give you the order? Be strong and brave. Sounds like Joshua. So Absalom's men did what Absalom had ordered. When I first started preparing the sermon, I thought I would just give all this as backstory. And so I really dug in. I was like, this is a whole lesson on its own. And my regret is that I'm not going to be here for the next 3 weeks to pick up where this leaves off next week. You'll have some special guests coming in and speaking. So it'll be fine, but I really wish I could stick to this story. So Absalom defends his sister. When no one was willing to do what the law said to do, he did. He did it. And that reminded me of another story of the son of Judah and an innocent woman. John chapter 8. At dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. No one knows what he wrote. There's some cool theories, but no one really knows. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." The church is called to be a shield for the innocent, not an arrow We live in a bizarre time. We live in a bizarre time where Christian organizations will defend the perpetrator and accuse the victim. Oh, he was an abusive pastor over here. Let's move him over here. And let's not tell anybody what happened. And let's pay off this person so they won't say anything. We'll have them sign an NDA. Then they can't talk about it. And he still gets to keep his job. It happens in the Catholic Church. It happens in the Baptist Church. It happens in the Methodist Church. And if the churches of Christ were more organized, it would happen here. But instead what happens is the elders or leaders of a church will say, hey, you leave, and we won't say a word, and you can go work somewhere else. But what about Tamar? Oh, maybe it'll all go away. Maybe it'll all go away. We won't have to do anything. And there we are, the church, shooting arrows at a victim instead of holding up a shield to protect them. The very people who were called to protect them turn around and attack them and plot against them. It's unfortunate the church is full of Jonadabs. Full of people who should be there saying, Amnon, you're nuts, man. We should put you in a padded room. But instead say, how can I protect you? How can I make sure that your life is good? We're called to be a shield, not an arrow. Proverbs 31 says this, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. This is what we're called to do, among many other things. And so as difficult as that story is to go through, and I know it's difficult, more difficult for some than others, I think it's a lesson we need to hear. Because we live in a culture and in a society and even in a Christian culture that defends those who do evil and accuses the victim of the evildoer. And it's not right. May we be known as people who stand up and do the right thing for the right people. Instead of sitting back and hoping it all goes away, or worse. Amen? Amen.